All right. Well, we're back at it. Neither of us have quit since the last episode.
Yeah, I know, right? We're still doing this thing. Still,
if
you
listen to the
last episode, you were like,
you probably were thinking, there's no way these guys are back.
Or maybe they should have quit.
Or they should have quit. That's right.
We're just being honest. We last episode we were just being honest and just said, hey, let's just vent for a minute and let everybody know we're real and what the struggle of doing this thing is.
We're like a therapy session. So
pretty much.
But I'm excited today. I think today is a needed topic. We've talked about it off and on, but I don't know if we've ever devoted
I think so too.
episode.
I think this will be super good to talk about parent ministry and not so much parent ministry as much as how to work with parents, how to connect with parents.
Yeah.
There's some definite thoughts I think you and I both have on this, and we'll set that up here in a minute. But hey, before we do, don't forget our sponsors. This does cost us a little bit to do, and as a result, we don't make money on it, but our sponsors help.
We did.
Yeah, I wish we did too. I could use some money. I don't know what I'd do. I'd go to Disney. That's what I'd do.
You go to Disney more often.
Hashtag Disney Math. That said, we've got some amazing folks. The fun game, it's a rocket on a pole, but it's so much cooler than it sounds when I say that like that. With a Frisbee. Aerosport.fun. It's awesome. It really is a great indoor or outdoor game. You can get two of them and have even more fun and create. You can create all kinds of different ways to play just on your own. So check those guys out at aerosport.fun. If you've got parents with cell phones, issues, questions, that's a question I still get
all the time.
Hey, can you help? Do you do a talk on this or whatever, right? And it's a big thing for parents as they're wrestling through this. So our buddy Barrett Johnson, who's been on the podcast, he's awesome, and he created this resource for parents and kids to go through together, smartphones-101.com, and it's super cool. So that's a good one. Tell them about our big one, though.
Yeah, and then our friends at YM360, man, we love those guys. They pretty much do it all. Camps, games, curriculum, devotionals, kind of whatever you're looking for. I think especially this time of year when you're ramping up, maybe looking for some curriculum. If you're thinking and looking ahead, maybe doing some DNow stuff. They've got some great DNow stuff there. Just some guys that we love and trust that are doing student ministry. And we use them for all kinds of stuff personally. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, all this stuff.
And if you're thinking about even like right now, you probably should be starting to think about camp next year. And you could even look ahead and see they got some really awesome ones listed.
You know what? We don't talk about a lot. They also have some really neat conferences.
Oh yeah, the Clear conference that they do is just incredible. It's a preaching conference.
Yeah,
where you talk about it's good.
Which after a year of COVID and everyone watching themselves preach, we probably are now all convinced that we need to go to a preaching conference together.
Yeah, for real. So Well, hey, parents, here's my theory there, Jody. Tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think if there's ever been a time in our ministries, in our youth ministries, that we would love to ignore parents. You didn't think I was going to set it up that way, did you? I caught you on that one. That's funny. Like that we would ever love to ignore parents and not have to talk to parents and not have to do anything for parents or do anything with parents. My theory is that now is that time, because in a lot of ways it's harder than it's ever been, because we're constantly having to give them bad news about something being canceled, or having to give them bad news about something being changed, or having to give them bad news about a kid who's been quarantined.
Yeah. And
everybody's got an opinion, and parents are probably more opinionated than they've ever been. And so I think in youth ministry, my theory here is that, man, it's a good time to pull away from that. But the fact is that we should not pull away.
Yeah.
That we have to lean in and be experts and be better at this than we've ever done. It's been important for both you and I in our ministries over the years, and so we thought we would just give you some practical tips on things we've done and that we're doing that would be helpful to reconnect, stay connected to parents, especially in light of COVID and everything that's going on.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, because, you and I have done this for a long time. I think when we first started in this youth ministry thing, parents were not an emphasis at all. In fact, for a long time, it was like they were almost seen as kind of the obstacle. Oh, if parents would just get out of the way, we could have more fun.
That was a terrible plan.
It was a horrible plan. And I think everyone has realized in youth ministry that that's a horrible plan. The problem is,
and it felt like overall in youth ministry that we were headed towards some good in this thing.
yes, but it was not. It did not end well.
Take COVID.
The problem now is, like, I think everyone recognizes that parents are important, but no one's still really doing much about it. Or a lot of folks aren't, at least. No one, maybe you don't know where to start. And I think if you haven't really been intentional with parents, you've got to recognize that it's going to take some time.
And I think part of that fear, Jody, is, and I joked about it at the beginning, though, when I intentionally connect myself to parents now, I'm opening up the door for them to have opinions and have conversations with me and tell me what they like and don't like and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a little bit of trepidation there with that, more so than ever before.
Yeah, because you're inviting criticism in. And generally, most youth pastors that I know, including me and you, we probably have more insecurities than we are willing to admit. And
especially when I was younger, bro.
Yeah.
Like before I had teenagers, like that was really intimidating.
And so now all of a sudden you're inviting critics in. That's a scary thing.
But it's our job.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah, for real.
But it's important, and over the longer haul, it will really help your effectiveness in what you're trying to accomplish.
Oh yeah.
If you're not partnering with parents well, you're not going to have much to show for things when you leave. Long term,
it's worth it.
Just won't happen.
It's worth it. Well, let's. So, what are some things that come to your mind? I've got a couple things as well, but what are some things that come to your mind? Just some practical tips, something somebody can maybe try to do. Hey, talk about this. Let me ask you specifically about one.
Okay.
The importance of parent meetings related to events.
Yeah. I love
so like prep
this.
For so you're going on an event, you're going to camp, and you got to have a parent meeting for that thing.
Yeah.
So talk about that for a minute, because that's something you've had to do a lot of lately.
It is, and what's funny is you and I have talked about this. I love parent meetings.
Yeah, well, so guilty as well. Like, I actually love being we talk about the challenges, but I think you and I have crossed over.
For sure.
Okay, so to be fair, what we would say there is hope. We both have been in that place where we were terrified, but we have both embraced it, and as a result, now we see it as a great resource.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't want to do without now, so we continue to lean into that, and that's why we're talking about this today. But talk specifically, though, what are some tips related to, I'm going on an event.
Yep.
So how do I do that well?
Mission trips, whatever it is. Yeah, so I think, first of all, you need to plan the meeting when you plan the event. Like, if you just say, we'll have a parent meeting, and you don't factor that into your calendaring of the event, you won't have the parent meeting. Right. Or you won't communicate it in time that parents will actually be able to attend. So the first thing I'd say is make sure as you're planning the event, go ahead and plan for the parent meeting and when that's going to be, what time, and communicate the parent meeting when you communicate all of the dates and details about the event. I think it should seem obvious, but we don't do it. The second thing I always try to do is, like, I sit down, like, with our team, and specifically my wife, who's great as a mom, and almost do, like, okay, let's talk through the questions that parents would have.
Yeah, buddy.
What is every question that a parent could have?
That's a boss move, by the way. Pro tip, boss move that you just gave, utilizing your wife, who is a mom.
Yeah.
Asking all these questions. She's the one filling out all the paperwork, doing all the stuff. Pro tip right there, involving a parent to plan the parent meeting.
Yeah, and if I wasn't married, Sarah and I have
if I didn't have kids yet.
If I didn't have kids yet, if I wasn't a parent, then I'm going to go find a parent that I trust. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take them to lunch or sit down and meet and talk through what kind of questions they think that other parents would have. Where do I see Not even just questions. Where do I think parents are going to be frustrated? What are some things that I'm going to have to explain and navigate that might be roadblocks or stumbling blocks for a certain event? If you're doing a mission trip, you're probably going to have a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of trepidation for parents who are maybe seeing their kid for the first time.
So
get out in front of those things.
I would push back on you a little bit in this, though. Not push back, but clarify, at least for me, what would be important in that. Yeah. When I come up with that list, I would want to make sure that in that list, I then cross out things that they can read. I don't want to make them get out of their house, come up to church for stuff, for basic information like we're leaving at 8:00, or you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say that at the parent meeting.
You might cover a couple of those things, but
I'm
you
not going to go into detail about those.
But you don't want to ask people to come back up for stuff that they could just read in an email. As a parent, I don't want to read
Correct.
Stuff.
It has to be worth the time.
Yeah, you got to come up with something that we're going to do together. And I've
I'm
got one to add to that in a minute, but I'll wait.
I'm generally going to put together some type of information packet for them, which is super easy now.
Yeah.
I can do it as a PDF. They can download off the website too.
Come on.
And I'm not going to read the whole packet to them. I'm going to highlight the things that come up most often with parents, like the concerned parent. If there are certain things that are really important for me that they understand, if you have a cell phone policy, if you have what are the rules for the event, whatever those things are, I always remind parents. They know what time we're leaving. I always remind them when we come back, the time that we're returning. Especially
including how to track that, because you're probably going to have like a 100%. Live Instagram, text messaging, something.
How do they stay in touch while we're gone? How do they get updates while we're away? Yep. All those types of things. Rules. If there's money due, I'm going to talk about payments. I always, this is going to sound a little manipulative maybe, but I always try to find ways to build into especially a higher cost event, for a parent to save money, even if it's like $10.
Okay.
So maybe if they sign up by a certain date, they get it cheaper. That does a couple things for me. It gets momentum for signups.
Yeah.
It also allows me to tell parents, hey, if you come to the parent meeting, I'm going to tell you how to save money on this event, because every parent is busy. You know this. Sure. As parents, we're running crazy.
Yep.
But if you give me if I think I'm just coming to an informational meeting, that's not going to be super high on my list. But if you tell me, hey, I'm going to learn how to save money,
big
for an event, I'm probably going to show up.
And so I'm going to throw mine out there now, because it goes along with what you just said. I think you want to add a spiritual aspect to this thing as well. Sure. First, you got to genuinely believe that parents have a big part of that in terms of, so you want to plead with them to pray for said event, even have an actual prayer time, maybe even hand out a prayer guide, if you will, but making that something like, look, we're not saying we're going to take your kids off and do all, we're asking you to be a part of this thing. Here's how you can help prepare your kids spiritually, and that part is huge. Yep. Yeah. Now, there's one big thing you've not talked about, though, that is new in the last 2 years that we have to be prepared for.
Yeah.
And that's the COVID plan.
Always. Yeah.
I mean, that's a new part of, you want to be able to answer those questions, what your plan is, how you will respond.
You better follow your plan.
You got to follow your plan, and boy, the last thing in the world you want to do is stand up in front of a group of people not knowing for sure what your answer is.
You're going to get asked.
And tip there also is make sure that your leadership supports your plan.
Yeah, work that out with your leadership.
Because you don't want your pastor coming behind you and going, well, actually,
Yeah. Yeah. You need to be on the same page there.
Yeah.
I like to invite my leadership to the parent meeting if I can.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on the context. Yeah. It's always helpful. I think when people see, especially if it's, if it's your senior pastor or whoever, that's always helpful for folks to see. It kind of gives you a little more credibility in that meeting.
Yeah.
Which is nice. A little bit of that authority gets passed, which is helpful. I think. Good. So we typically would do those parent meetings before big events, leading up to big events, mission trips, camps, probably DNOws, whatever, retreats.
Yes.
And then we also do them like at the beginning of the year. So like right about this time of year, we would do a parent meeting. If there's any big changes coming up that we want to communicate, we would do that.
Yeah. I've heard, it's when you have a larger group, I don't think this is as effective, but I think if you have like a smaller group, kind of having like a state of the youth group address at the beginning of the year, here's everything that's coming up. Here's all the dates. Here's everything. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think you're not going to get every parent to those types of meetings.
But the parents that want it,
you'll give it. And then when parents later tell you, and honestly, this is why I do it. When I have parents later who tell me they didn't know about something, I ask them if they came to the parent meeting.
Yep. And
if they say no, then I tell them, well, this is why we have it. We went over all this at the parent meeting.
You got to do that carefully, tactfully. You can't just
you're not a punk about it. But hey, we do go over this at the parent meeting. Here's the information, or here's what we need. I think for me, one of the things that a parent meeting does, whether it's beginning of the year, kind of that state of ministry you're talking about, whether it's an event kind of parent meeting, driven parent meeting, we can talk about different ways to utilize. I think we'll get into that. There's a few other ways and things that we try to meet with and partner with parents, but one of the things I think is really important is every time you get in front of parents, you have to communicate and cast vision. What is it that you're aiming at? Why are you doing and making the decisions you're doing? Why are parents so important to your ministry? All of those things. You do those enough. You drip it every meeting. After a while, that's how you begin to build culture.
Sure.
That's how you build trust over and over and over and over.
And the better you are at that, that's also how you recruit volunteers as well, 100%. Because they start to buy in to what you're talking about.
Always recruiting at parent meetings. Always. I'll never do a parent meeting and not give an opportunity for them to plug in and serve somewhere.
It's good. Anything else related to that you want to throw in there?
No, I think just to reiterate, I think you have to have clear idea what you're walking into. Don't just have a parent meeting and walk in.
Have an agenda. Gee whiz.
You need an agenda. You need to start on time.
Yes.
Please start and end on time. There's nothing that will ruin your credibility with the parent than starting late and ending late.
Yes.
If you can end early, that's even better.
Yep.
But start on time, end on time. Be clear, have an agenda. Thoughtful, mindful off the front.
And so a pro tip there related to what you just said too is that's going to feel ridiculous the first couple times you do it, and you say the meeting's going to start at 5, and 5 o'clock rolls around, and you know that half the people that are going to be at the meeting haven't quite walked in the room yet.
Yeah.
But what you have to do over time, you don't want to be snooty about it and be all, hey, on time or whatever, but even do a countdown or whatever. What will happen over time is people will start to understand, no, we start on time, and we honor that. So, yeah.
And I always tell them, hey, listen, I want to be mindful of your time, so we're going to go ahead and get started.
Yeah, for real.
And pick a time that parents can make it. Like, first of all.
Yeah.
Like, don't pick a, midday meeting during the week when most of your parents are at work.
Yeah.
Like, pick a time where they make it. And if you need to, like, we'll do this a lot. We'll pick a time during student programming when they're already dropping their kid off, so they're not having to make an extra trip.
You got to think like a parent.
So we can meet with the parents while their students are doing what they would normally do.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So,
well, hey, I've got when it comes to connecting with parents, I've got one that I think is important as well. And I think again, you just have to choose to lean into this during this time that we're living in. But I think training parents is what I would talk about. Just being intentional with finding resources and training parents. That can be done in a lot of different ways. You need to know your culture and what you can do and not do, but that can be done in person. And even if you don't have teenagers yet, I think you can still do your homework and learn and come up with things. And I think that's a great time for appropriate self-deprecating moments of, I'm reading this list to you that I got offline. Do you agree with this point? Help me as a guy who doesn't have teenagers. Would you agree with this? And that's, I think, often going to lead to great discussion. I think even if you have teenagers, I think even that you still have to be willing to say, okay, I kind of am tracking with this a little bit, but y'all track with this. It's just not walking up like, you don't have to be the expert who knows it all. You're guiding conversation there, with that training, even if that ends up being just youth culture updates. So you could do that in person, like you could have everybody come back up for a parent meeting. I would say, man, if you could do 3 of those a year, if you want to get real practical, I think that would be a great goal. 3, 4, maybe.
Yeah, that's our target. That's our target is 3.
I think that's huge, man. If you could get your parents to come together for just a growth moment 3 times a year, 4 times a year, I mean, that would be huge. And again, just providing resources for them there, maybe talking about a book, showing them something that you've been reading. I think that would be great. But another way to do that, we talk about Zoom a lot, and I have a new theory related to Zoom, Jody, or whatever, online resource people are using. And that is, I get everybody wants to talk about Zoom fatigue, but I tell you, man, there are some ways you can utilize Zoom that works amazing, and that is when you offer something over Zoom that they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's when it makes sense. So I have a thing here in Georgia where a bunch of Georgia youth pastors, we get together from all over the state of Georgia and hang out on Thursday mornings, for the purpose of just connecting and unpacking what we did the night before and being an encouragement to each other. Well, here's the thing. There's only one way we can get together with youth pastors all over the state of Georgia, and that's online.
Right.
Here's the thing, man. If you did an online, like a Zoom-type training on a night where you allowed parents, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but where you allowed parents to jump on a Zoom call to hear maybe a speaker that's in the United States somewhere that otherwise you probably couldn't afford to fly them in and do all of that. But you'd be surprised almost any of these folks that write books, do parent ministry, do parent things, talk about teenagers, talk about Gen Z.
Yeah.
They'd be willing to jump on a Zoom call in a heartbeat for cheap. You're going to have to pay them a little something as a thank you. But again, that's giving them something that they just can't get anywhere. My experience with that also is I had more parents be willing to, since we didn't have Sunday night church.
Yeah.
So they were willing to jump on it. They actually loved the fact that they didn't have to get all snazzied back up and drive in, depending on what this distance is. So I think there's something
you've
to that.
led some of those, right? Like I've led some of those, been asked to come in and do some of that Zoom stuff. It's fun to do even as the one
I would do that
speaking or leading or training. 100%. Yeah, I've done several over this last year.
And the more you do Zoom, I think the better you get at leading discussion on it. And again, it's all about attitude there. But ultimately, though, when it comes to connecting with parents, making it a point that you're trying to provide training resources. Another way to do that would be just be an old-fashioned newsletter.
Yep. I think you should do that too.
Where you're just sending out a newsletter monthly, whatever. And part of the newsletter is, it's not just a bunch of information, but part of the newsletter is you're kind of keeping an eye out for articles you've read, resources, and you link to those.
Yeah.
And say, here's a great thing. I'm not saying, and actually on the one we did, I had a little preface. I'm not saying I agree with everything this article's saying.
Right.
But it's good food for thought,
Yeah.
But I think that part's huge.
Yeah, I don't think there's a silver bullet for parents, and that's what I would hope that you'd hear is like you need parent meetings, you need some parent trainings, you need consistent communication, newsletters, if that's an email, if that's a physical letter, whatever works in your context. Are you communicating through social media? Great. Do you have texts? Great. Is there a group me? Depending on your, I think you've got to find what works for you, but you want to give them as many opportunities to get information and to be informed and to feel connected as you can, because one way won't hit everybody.
Yeah, it's got to be a multi approach to any time you're promoting or advertising anything.
Yeah, one of the things that we're going to do this year, and we were going to do it before, but the world blew up with COVID. We're going to host some kind of coffee nights.
Oh, that's cool.
So like during our small groups, all of our programming happens at one night. On one night, we have small groups and large group on the same night for us. And so like during small groups, or maybe it may extend depending on what that looks like. We're just going to have some coffee and almost like a open mic Q&A kind of hang
I love
out.
that.
And if parents
that
have
would work so well around here. That's good.
Super casual. We'll have a few things, that we want to just update them on, but nothing big.
Get some of your leadership students to serve the coffee that night.
Yeah, that's the plan. Have our student leadership serve, and then just kind of let parents hear from parents and ask questions, and we can kind of speak in and answer things and pray for one another. And it's really just kind of an open invite on a regular basis. I think we're
make it and I think what I like it, that's an experience. That's not just a come hear this information. Okay, check. We've done our thing
for sure.
We're
gonna put some tables and chairs out. Have some decent coffee for them. And
that's where it really would be worth you trying your best to get your pastor to show up to that thing or some other key people in the church that could be an encouragement and just be pastoral.
Yeah. I'm excited about those because I think it's way more informal. And
you should fly me out. Let me teach one of those. I'd love to.
Yeah, sure.
I'll come for the price of a Disneyland ticket.
You can't go. You're not a California resident right now.
I will move to California.
No, you won't. That's
no,
fine.
I'm not. That's not.
But I think kind of those finding moments for those informal kind of parent gatherings is really, really key for us. Again, just an opportunity consistently to tell parents how much we appreciate and love them.
Yeah, totally.
Communicate the vision and the direction, and in a very quick, brief elevator pitch.
Yeah,
kind of way. And
so we kind of stumbled into a third thing here, just to clarify as people, if they're list making kind of folks, it's that having meetings for events, and we gave some tips to that. Then we talked about this idea of training, but what we're really talking about now is this idea of communicating well. I'm holding my fingers like some people can see them. That's funny.
Yeah.
Number 3, communicating, and it's just making sure that you have a very detailed plan and that you've
I think communicating well, and I think building community among your parents is key.
Huge.
If you think of if your kids ever played sports or anything, you kind of end up as the parents of that team. You're kind of in it together. You're at the games together. You're taking turns doing snacks. You're whatever you're doing. And so, how do we build that type of community in our student ministry?
And I think as a youth pastor, you also have to develop. Okay, so there's a balance with what I'm saying here. You might can help me process this out loud, but you're limited on how much time you have with teenagers, so you definitely don't want to be the youth pastor that all you ever do on a Wednesday night or Sunday morning is talk to parents, talk to adults.
Oh, for sure.
But you also, I think, don't want to be the guy or the gal who only talks to teenagers, or that when parents are coming and showing up to pick up their kids, you're putting the ping pong table away.
Right. And we've talked about that before with volunteers.
Like you want to make sure that you're just getting to know, having those conversations with parents will help go a long, long way.
Yeah, I think just being seen, as superficial as it sounds, how are you out front when they're dropping off and when they're picking up? Are you available when parents need, if they have a quick question on a Wednesday night or a Sunday or whatever that is? Or are you in there setting up chairs and trying to
come on?
I continually challenge the guys on my team, our student team, to make a list of all the things they're doing, circle the things that only they can do, and recruit volunteers to do the rest. Yep. And that's not saying that those things are beneath them, but there are some things that only they can do. And when we had Matt Lawson on a few episodes ago, he nailed that. I mean, his story of him cooking burgers for the football team, and his supervisor at the time saying, "I didn't hire you to cook hamburgers, flip burgers." That type of mentality we have to own and realize. As the leader of the student ministry, whether you have 10 kids or 100 kids or 500 kids or however many, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to lead the larger picture of the ministry.
Yes.
It's like I was listening to, this is a superficial example, but I think it'll make sense. I was watching ESPN. They were interviewing all the SEC coaches, ahead of football season, and they were talking to one coach and asking him, what are your responsibilities as a head coach look like versus what they look like when you were just a coordinator?
Yeah.
And he was saying, man, when I was a coordinator, I was leading 15. I had 15 guys that I was responsible for. I was pouring into 15 guys. As a head coach, I'm around my guys. I'm steering and leading the direction for our guys. But I am investing in my coordinators, and I'm worried about recruiting, and I'm worried about scholarships, and now I'm worried about vaccinations, and I'm worried about, there's so many other things that I have to be aware of that keeps us going. Mm-hmm. And I think as a youth pastor, even if you're in a context with 10 kids, you still have to be mindful of parents, perception, involvement in a larger church, relationship with your pastor, your leadership, relationship with schools. All of those things are outside of probably what got you into student ministry, which was hanging out with students. But they're just as important. And if you don't do those things well, then it doesn't really matter how much you hang out with students, because it's going to be short-lived and your impact is going to be small.
Yep. It's good stuff, man. Well, we're not trying to pile on you if you're listening, in the midst of all the crazy. I know we all feel like there's 1,000 things we're trying to deal with, but I think Jody and I both, we've done this long enough to know that it's worth the effort. It's worth the getting this done. And I think what we're mindful of right now is there probably really is a temptation to pull away from that because we just don't want to have to deal with the criticisms and stuff. But it's worth the time. It's valuable to do this. So we just want to keep encouraging folks to do this well. Anything else on your list?
There's a couple things I've done in the past that I hope to do again at some point. Again, I'm not super far into the ministry here in our context, so all of this parent stuff, by the way, as we said earlier, just takes time.
Yes.
I had a parent leadership team that was gold for us for years in a previous context in church, and they just kind of served as an advisory board for me, helping me think through a lot of the things even that we're talking about. How does this impact parents? How can we better communicate? Where are we missing? And it was made up of parents that were invested, that I knew supported me, that loved me, our church, but were not afraid to tell me where I was wrong. I would rather have the criticism from those folks that I knew had my back and that I knew loved and supported me than people who didn't know me that well, because I stepped into something that I didn't quite see coming. And so forming a parent leadership team was really helpful for me, and it was a parent-led team that I just sat in on, really. So that was really helpful. The other thing that we did that was super fun, that is much more difficult to pull off, is for a few years we did a parent retreat where we took the parents instead of the students. Students stayed back. We did a Friday night dinner to Saturday dinner kind of retreat. We went to a camp that was kind of near, that we went to, which was nearby. And because it was a pretty short retreat, wasn't very expensive, just kind of got away with some parents, played together a little bit, and had a little bit of training built in. But a lot of it was, again, just this community building. Had some folks kind of contribute to that training, so it wasn't just me. It was so much fun and really, really helpful for me to do. So that's the other one that I hope to do again. And then a big thing that I have done for a long time is I generally try to print off like just an empty calendar, 31 days or whatever.
Yeah.
And I will pass that around at a parent meeting and ask parents to sign up and commit to pray for me and our student ministry team on a certain day of the month. So if they say, I'm going to pray they write down on the 3rd. Every 3rd of the month, they're going to pray for our student ministry team. What I have found is parents who pray for me generally
aren't as mean
to me. But they're more supportive. They are less critical, And so then what I do is I have that calendar, and those parents, and I can have, more than one parent can sign up for a day. Doesn't matter to me. It's just helpful to have every day fill. The confidence that it gives me to lead, knowing that every day I have parents who are praying for us.
Yeah.
Is huge, right?
Sure.
And then what I try to do is I will try to have a separate kind of email list for those folks, or text thread, depending on how many. And then I will communicate to them specifically things to be praying for. So, hey, we've got this event coming up. Be praying for this. Or, hey, we're trying to make some decisions around this. Please be praying for this. Or, hey, next week we're at camp. Be praying for this. Or, and depending on your context and how close-knit and what you want to, sometimes, there's been things where it's like, man, hey, pray for this. I remember when my oldest was much younger, she had some seizures, and we found out she had epilepsy. Scary season. That went out to parents. Hey, man, please pray for our oldest. We just found out that, she has epilepsy, and we're trying to navigate that with neurologists and appointments. And when there was a big appointments coming up, so some of it was personal. Now you have to be careful there, right? There's a line.
But I think that really does connect dots in a way that's super important.
Yeah.
It makes you authentic. It makes it real. I think people might be less likely to treat you as if, well, you're just a paid,
100%
guy, and you're just walking through this being authentic, being real.
And what I love about the calendar is you can literally do that in any context.
Yeah,
it requires zero budget. You could have 3 kids. And when I was in a much smaller context, when I first started out, I think we had 7 students in student ministry. I was part-time bivocational guy. I had parents pick days. It wasn't very many. I didn't have enough parents to fill the calendar. So I had them go first, and then I took it to our senior adults. And I had our senior adults fill in the rest.
Yeah, man. That's good.
But building that prayer team was really helpful. Those senior adults, all those senior adults were grandparents,
Oh, totally.
So it's simple, but it's been really effective and in both of those things. And I think we just have to get creative. We have to think through where parents are.
Yep.
And how do we get in front of them and help them in ways that are actually helpful to them?
Yeah.
That also build a relationship.
So let me take all of this that we're talking about here for our listeners that are listening and going, oh my gosh, like I'm so behind on all of this, When I hear all of these things, I'm not doing any of these things. I think one thing to keep in mind that's super important whenever you listen to a podcast like this, I'm just talking real practical here for a moment, is that what you don't want to allow yourself to do is to get overwhelmed to the point where you're thinking of all these things and going, I can never do all that. Well, our encouragement is not that you
don't
do all these things. My encouragement would be that you let this simmer for a second, not too long, and then you grab a sheet of paper and you brainstorm for a minute and go, okay, and then you pray. I mean that seriously, that you say, Lord, help me to know of the things that I might could be, what's something I should maybe add to my plate right now? Because if you try to do all 3, 4, 5 things that we're talking about right now at the same time, you're probably not going to do any of them with excellence. So identify, 1 or 2 of these things and start that process, but make a plan. Write it out on paper and plan it and think through it, and then bring somebody along with you. Honestly, that's true for most things, I think, when it comes to growth. We talk about middle school, splitting middle school and high school ministry from time to time, and the importance of that, what I think is important about that. But I'm always careful to say, look, don't all of a sudden just walk into your high school or your student ministry and throw a hand grenade in there and go, okay, middle school, high school split 100%. Right. But do that over seasons of time, and I think that would be true for this parent ministry stuff, as well, is just to find the right things at the right moment. So I just want to encourage everybody to, as they're listening, not to allow themselves to get too overwhelmed or to beat themselves up, because that's not going to be good either. That's not the point of this. It's not, I'm not doing any of these things. don't beat yourself up over it, but rather identify some growth moments, and try to do some stuff about it. So it's huge.
I think I've heard John Acuff say, and he's quoting others. I know he's probably quoting Andy Stanley. Sounds like something Andy Stanley would say, but
yeah,
don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle.
Oh, sure.
And I think it's in our world of podcasts and YouTube, and the comparison game is so hard already.
Well, and we're giving you the highlight reel too, right?
Oh, 100%.
We're being a version of Facebook and Instagram right now, in the fact that we're doing a podcast and we're telling you the highlights of what we found successful, not the moments we failed or have screwed up or
and
messed
I will
up.
say this, even if you were doing all these things, it doesn't mean that parent ministry is going to be easy. I mean, every week I have frustrated parents that I'm having to navigate and respond to things with.
Yep.
It's just part of doing ministry. That's part of it. You have to learn to navigate those things. And again, going back to where we started, when you start inviting parents into the conversation, you're inviting critics.
Yeah, for real.
But you're doing so intentionally so that you can improve and be better at what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yep. So, well, good stuff, man. Real good stuff.
That's great. It's great. Hopefully some practical takeaways, and especially compared to our last episode.
We weren't trying to be practical.
Helpful.
We're trying to be
And
real.
I would love to know, man, if you're in our Facebook group, if you're not, you should jump into the super secret podcast group that we talk about all the time. And I would love to know what you're doing with parents. Maybe we didn't mention. What are you finding helpful?
Sure.
Or what are some things that we've mentioned that, man, you're like, oh, I've never thought about that, but I want to try that. And just, man, I just, let's learn from each other on that, because it's always changing. It's always morphing. And if there's anything, obviously, that Chris and I can do to help and encourage you along that way, we want to be there to help as a resource and guide along the way, too. So.
Yeah, man. That's good stuff. Well, thanks, everybody, for listening, for sure. Don't forget the folks that help us make this happen from a financial standpoint of paying for all of the hosting and podcast resources that we have to use. The YM360, Youth Ministry 360, they're amazing. Tons of resources.
And, what we didn't mention is the promo code.
Oh, yeah, the promo code.
So you can save some money on there.
Yeah.
It's Longer Haul.
Longer Haul.
4, that's the number 4, the letter U.
Yep.
So think 90s texting.
Yeah,
from a flip phone. Longer Haul 4U.
Yep.
Will save you some money on there.
Yep, and we change that thing from time to time just to keep it current.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the current one. And then smartphone help.
Smartphones 101.
Smartphones-101.com. Bear Johnson's resource there from Info for Families, good stuff. And then the amazing game, aerosport.fun. Really
and there's promo code Longer Haul for that.
There is. Free shipping, I think, is what that's about. Yeah,
free shipping, I think, which is always helpful.
With that. Gee whiz.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah. So good times,
great.
Man.
Well, hey, guys, thanks for listening today, jumping in, putting up with Chris. And we always appreciate you continuing to listen. We appreciate the support, and we're grateful for what you're doing. We know it's hard. It's been a difficult season of ministry, more so probably than any in our lifetime. And yet you're still making a difference, and you're still running at a generation.
Hang in there, folks. Hang in there.
A whole bunch of people are running from.
Let's get this thing done. Let's stay in it. Let's keep doing it.
For sure. Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys in the next episode.